Okay, welcome everybody to this. Get that going. There we go. Welcome everybody to this Monday morning, and it's a Raising the Bar series, 4 out of 12, an exclusive buyer broker agreement and application. We just have to run through those rules one more time. I'm just trying to get the screen going. Here we go. There we go. So for those of you who may just joined us, here's just a recap. Have your full name on the screen. If not, make sure Leslie know who you are. Have your video turned on. Of course, be in attendance for the whole of the class. You seem engaged. Those of you who've been on my classes before will know that I do not engage with any chat. So if you've got anything to say, just literally unchime and unmute and chime in. That's the easiest way to do that. And of course, I'll give you 3 keywords as we go through this class. Then that little icon pops up. Oh, that's Rosie, one of our Bernese mountain dogs. And when she pops up, the keyword will show on the screen. So today we're going to be talking about raising the bar. Whichever brokerage we're with, I always encourage people to use education to raise their bar in real estate. As we do that, we can come or get a little bit better in this industry. Our principal broker, who is Jennifer Yo, has said this: keeping our real estate education up to date helps us keep within federal and Utah real estate law, and will keep us and our clients out of trouble. So that's a good thing. Hopefully we can do that. Some of you may have recognized this film producer's name, Samuel Goldwyn. He said, a verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. So I thought it was quite an appropriate little quote for this class today. So we're going to look at this exclusive buyer broker agreement and figure out how we can apply it in our opportunities to serve people in real estate here in Utah. So we'll start off by going to this website. Those of you who are familiar with utahrealestate.com, anybody who's just joined this industry, if you go to that site and /forms, you'll then be able to figure out where to go to find this exclusive buyer broker agreement in that list on the left there. And that's what we're going to look at. That's where you'll find your agreement. That's the one we use. Just there. Okay. Well, it looks a bit like this. And very, very clear. All of these contracts or agreements are written by qualified lawyers who have them approved in Utah. And this is the one we're going to use. There's a couple of things on here we might want to talk about first. And if you notice at the top of this page, we've got a logo. So Utah Association of Realtors logo. Who'd like to tell me how important that is? Particularly if you're working with a new client who may not have purchased a property before. How might we explain what that logo means and how important it is for our license? Let me see if I can call on someone. Stephen, how would you like to? We've got 2 Stephens here, Stephen Preston, Stephen Ford. Stephen Preston, how would you like to respond to that for us? Tell people how important that logo is. Often we can forget how much effort it takes for us to actually get licensed with Utah Association of Realtors.
Well, I think that shows that you're part of a professional association that has standards, and so that offers protection to the client that you're working with. It indicates that you are held, that you as a broker or agent are held to certain standards, that you have training which is available to you, and I think it sets you apart, and so it certainly assists you in your marketing efforts. So there are a number of different reasons that it is an advantage to you.
Perfect. That was a great summary. That was a great summary. And of course, we have to keep that license renewed and up to date by being part of education classes to keep ourselves up to date with what's going on. So very, very important to share that with particularly a new client that may never have dealt with this agreement before. I'll put at the top there, agents must go through the Utah Division of Real Estate to activate their licenses and place them with a realtor member broker before joining the Salt Lake Board of Realtors. When you join as a member of the Utah Association of Realtors, you become part of the largest network of real estate professionals in Utah, which Stephen highlighted for us. Wonderful. Let's go to the other little logo on the right there. Who can tell me about that? Who'd like to chime in on that logo? Because that's another important logo that talks about our way in which we work. All right, let's pick on someone. Remy, how you doing, Remy? Good to see you. I know Remy will help us on this one.
It is good to see you, Stephen. I appreciate that logo as it clearly speaks to our profession and how we abide by federal laws that prohibit us from discriminating against any class for whatever reason. And these classes, of course, they include the disabled, based on race, color, gender, marital status, etc. We don't have any wiggle room to allow discrimination to enter into our engagement of the public vis-a-vis real estate.
Perfect. Great overview there, Remy. Thanks for sharing that. Let's put a note up there. The Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity responsible for administrating and enforcing federal fair housing laws and establishing policies that make sure all Americans have equal access to housing of their choice, signed by or into law on the 11th of April, 1968 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. So very important, that little logo there. You'll notice that underneath the title there, we've got quite a strong bold set of text that says this is a legally binding agreement. Read carefully before signing. Designated agency brokerage. So your brokerage will automatically fill in there, and obviously you'll put your client's name into that little section there. That brings up our first keyword. I'm not sure what those 3 lines are on this sheet. I don't know how they've got on there, but anyway, we'll have to figure that out down the track. Let's pull this keyword up. It's going to be exclusive. So if you want to jot that down, that will be your first keyword in this class. EXCLUSIVE, exclusive. You see that? Exclusive. That will be the first keyword. So jot that down. I will not repeat that again. And also, we cannot share that in chat. If you have any challenges with any of the keywords, talk to Leslie Ann privately through chat. But that's the first keyword on this class, exclusive. I'm just going to pull it out and see whether or not I can get rid of those 3 lines that seem to have appeared on my screen. How odd that is. Where have they come from? I don't know how they've come on. Let's just see if I can figure out how to get rid of those. Huh, maybe not.
I'm not sure what 3 lines you're talking about.
Maybe it's just on my screen. Maybe it's just on my screen. I got rid of them anyway. I just got rid of them.
Okay.
Yeah, they were on my screen. How odd that was, I'm sure. Okay, there we go. Let's pull that screen back in. Play. Okay, there we go. So let's start off with this application. And we'll, obviously what we're saying here is you as a realtor or the real sales agent, you represent the company or the brokerage with whom you are part of. And this agreement is between your client and the brokerage. You're kind of between there, you're kind of like the go-between or the mediator or the representative, but ultimately the client is making a contract with the brokerage. Your client is agreeing to the exclusively to hire your brokerage to help them purchase a home. So that first part of the agreement, that's how we apply it. We are making sure that our client understands they're in an agreement with our brokerage. We've got the terms of the agreement. This is number 1. So the buyer hereby retains the company, including whoever that agent is. That will just automatically populate on the screen when you open up this this form. And then it clearly says here, starting on effective date as defined in section 15 below, and ending at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on whatever day it is. So just remember, this is the date you're going to put in here is when the contract ends. It's not the date when you're starting the contract. Clearly says there, ending And just make sure you understand that we are looking at that 5 p.m. Okay, it's 5 p.m. It's not 12 midnight. It's not 10 o'clock. It's 5 p.m. It's not 10 past 5. It is 5 p.m. That's when this will end. And we clearly say there, obviously, if the agreement closes before then of course the contract finishes there. It says to act as exclusive buyer's agent in allocating or negotiating for the acquisition of property. And then we've got some options here. So we can either put in a particular county or number of counties, or we could actually put an address of the actual properties there if it's only for one property. Anybody got any questions on that little section there? Okay, very good.
I actually have a question.
Perfect.
I have some clients that are actually looking for a house in Utah County and in Washington County. But they're also not settled on either of those. Would it be okay to write like state of Utah on that located at state of Utah? And it just covers all of Utah. Is that doable?
That's a good question. Generally speaking, people will put in the counties because it actually says county there. The better way would be, if you were going to make it absolutely clear, would be add an addendum to this contract, because you can't really blank out or adjust any of the wording. So it says here in, and then it's got a county Utah, and you could put in a number of different counties in there. If you're going to say all counties in Utah, you could put in there the word all counties. You could write in there all counties, or you'd add an addendum. You just got to make it absolutely clear. But we can't change or mark out that word. So probably the better way.
That's what we do in our brokerage, is we put the word all before county, and that leaves you open if you decide to switch counties at the last minute or something else comes up, that covers you and you don't have to keep redoing this paperwork.
Correct. Yeah. So they're the two options. You'd either put in the word all, or you have an addendum that would make it clear. The most important thing is to make it absolutely clear so that everyone understands what we're talking about here.
So this was one of those areas that I really like, that realtor that just brought up this issue. This was a real sort of a troubling area, but just like all, so I didn't like in all county, because to me, then county should be plural. I mean, it's just one of those silly things. So I just wonderful discussion with a broker a while back, discovered the word any in any county, and that has worked for me beautifully. In any county, that means any county within the state of Utah.
Yeah, that works as well. Very good, Rami. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we just need to make sure it's absolutely clear. And as Rami said, using the correct language in there makes it clear. If you just put all county, that doesn't really make sense. But all counties you could put in there, but any county is certainly perfect. Just make sure when you're working with these agreements, we cannot change any of the wording that's printed. All we can do is fill in the boxes or add an addendum to it. Very good. Any other questions on that slide?
Is there a standard amount of time that you usually extend that contract as far as the amount of days, 30, 60? Is there kind of a standard question, or is it what?
Yeah, who's asking me that question? Might be good if you just tell me.
This is McCoy.
McCoy, great. Okay,
Yeah.
McCoy. So that's a great question, and let's have a chat about it. The actual answer is it depends. Of course, it depends on what sort of market you're working with, what sort of house you're looking for, what sort of relationship you have, with your buyers, how long they're going to be around for, So if you're looking in a general market, but most people are putting probably 6 months in there. I think that's generally what we've done. But it will depend on the market. If you're looking for a house that's quite unusual, you may think this could take a year. Maybe it could take longer than a year. Of course, you're going to put a longer time in there. If you're in a very fast-moving market and you're looking for a sort of a small townhouse, you probably think we're going to find this. If it was obviously a buyer's market, we're going to find this fairly quickly. So you may put 3 months in there. But of course, in the last couple of years, we've been in a seller's market, so maybe it's going to take longer. Anybody like to comment on how they deal with the time frame on the closing?
Well, you also have to look at, you possibly might be doing new construction, which is going to take
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, that's right.
So
True.
Yeah, so the question does depend, but of course, you know, we have the opportunity to put the amount of time that we are comfortable with, of course, with our client. Some clients may not want to go into a contract with us for a long period of time because they may not have the ability to be able to work with that, or they may want freedom of movement. So just make sure that whatever you put in here, everybody's happy with. But as just mentioned, new construction is going to take a little bit longer than buying a existing home.
Okay.
Anybody else got any questions on that sheet? Okay, just make sure what the effective date is. Make sure the contract ends at 5 p.m. on that date, Mountain Standard Time, and be clear when you're describing the location. Notice that the buyer is agreeing not to enter into another buyer broker agreement with another real estate agent. Just look at the bottom there, it says the buyer agrees not to enter into another buyer broker agreement with another real estate agent or brokerage. So very important to understand that as well. Case application here, of course, we make sure our client understands the term agreement, but the time frame, the location, and the exclusivity. That's what we're working with on number 1. Okay, let's go for brokerage fee, number 2 here. So a couple of things here just to be aware of. We're going to put an amount in here, be a dollar amount, or we'll put a percentage amount. That's the percentage of the acquisition price. And this is called the BAC, which is the buyer agent commission. And what else is interesting about this little section? Who'd like to highlight another thing that sometimes we might forget? Can you see that in the middle there where it says buyer will pay the difference at closing? So if the BAC is less than the amount shown above, so say for instance you've got an agreement with 3% there, and when you're going to find a home, the sellers are only saying they're going to give 2%, and it says their buyer will pay the difference at closing. So just be aware of that. That's what the contract says. Unless, of course, agreed in writing otherwise. Anybody got any questions or comments on that section?
So I'm not sure if anyone's actually pulled that clause out and pursued fulfilling it. Look, we serve our client. We serve our clients, and a lot of listings today are at 2.5%, 2%. There is no way, personally, I'm just speaking just for myself, that I would trigger that clause after serving my client. They close. The BAC is of course per the listing 2.5%. This agreement says 3%. That I'm going to come after them for the other 0.5%. It just doesn't lend itself to the spirit of my business and to my passion to serve them. And this is a client that I'm nurturing not just for this transaction. I want to sell their home when they're ready. I want to help them get the next one. This is a lifelong relationship. So yes, this is a clause that that just makes it official. However, in the spirit of serving this long time relationship and nurturing it, I just leave it alone and just honor whatever BAC is offered on the listing.
Very good, Remy, and thanks for sharing that. there are two things just to remember when we're dealing with this. Is number one, this contract is between our client and our brokerage, our broker. So anything that we're going to change that's different to the contract, we need to make sure that our broker is comfortable with that, because that's where the place is. The key thing is when we're working on these contracts right from the outset, our job as a realtor or a sales agent professional is to explain what the contract is. That's important. I've actually never triggered this. I have had clients before who said, yeah, we're totally good. And if for some reason we found a house that was only offering 2%, we would make the difference up on the 3%. I have had people say that to me, which has been good because they value, what we're doing in the deal. But I've actually never enforced this. And I agree with Rami that we need to make sure that we are serving them best we can. But there may be a line that we don't cross. I mean, if there was someone that was, only offering, I don't know, 0.5%, and and we've got this in the clause, maybe we're going to have a discussion there and make sure that we are going to get remunerated for the work we do. But we'd have that discussion with our broker. That's the most important thing. This contract is not between us personally and the client. It is between the brokerage and the client. Is everybody good with that? Or anybody got any questions or further comments on that screen? Perfect. Just be aware that we are here to explain what the contract is saying. That's part of our job. This application here obviously explains by the financial obligation to the company regarding the brokerage fee. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's see if we can just roll that in again. There we go. And of course, we talked about that short form. Most important thing is that we are in concert with our client, and we're all on the same page. We all know from the outset what we're looking at. You do sometimes find if you make sure your client understands this from the outset, they may also be sensitive when they're looking at homes to make sure that BAC is reasonable. So that's another good reason to have that conversation. Okay, let's go to this next bit, which is the protection period. So if within so many months after the termination or expiration of the exclusive buyer, broker, the buyer, or a person acting on buyer's behalf enters into an agreement to purchase, exchange, or obtain an option on the leased property referenced, then we have a protection period. So let's have a chat about that. Everybody got an idea of how many months you might put in there? Any thoughts on that? Remember, this is months after the termination or expiration of the EBBA.
I typically do 6.
6. And who is that speaking again?
Kim.
Just say your name so I can figure out who I'm talking to.
Kim Pennell.
Oh, Kim. Great. Perfect. 6 is good. I think that's reasonable. But it also depends. It depends on what you're working with. Anybody else got any thoughts on that? It really, this is a discussion, and it does depend. Some people put 3. Okay, nobody else got into add there. Just make sure that that is the number of months after the termination of the contract. Okay, so there we have it. Application, explain to the buyer what the protection period means, depending on the type of property, current market trends and circumstances decide on the number of months required for the protection period. Right.
So, yeah, so we've got some brokers on this call. At least one spoke earlier. And I'm just curious as to the protection period that you feel is appropriate based on the agreements that come across your desk.
That's a good question. Anybody like to take that? Anyone, any of our brokers that are on this class would like to respond to that? No? Okay. I would imagine the brokers would see a number of different options in here. I would imagine the most popular is 3, and then maybe up to 6. But I'm sure they have seen some that have been longer than that and some that have been shorter. So No response on that, Rami. That was a good question.
That's
Good
okay.
We're all thinking we don't know. Remember, our job here is to explain it to the client. That's what we do. We need to understand this document so that we can answer the questions when our client asks them. So number 4 here, a few disclosures here, which are quite interesting. And this is we have some language here that's interesting. It starts off: the buyer warrants that the buyer will not enter into another EBBA agreement with another brokerage while this is still in force. And then the buyer will. Okay, so we've got A, which is about, in all communications with other real estate agents, they're going to make sure they let them know that they have entered into this exclusive buyer broker agreement. In B, they're going to furnish the buyer's agent, which is you, as with any or all relevant personal financial information that we'll need to obviously facilitate the acquiring of the property. C, exercise care and diligence with regards to the physical nature of the property. Hold harmless in D, hold harmless the company and buyer's agent against any claims as a result of any injuries during while inspecting the property. So, if something happens and I don't know, someone goes into the property, the inspector goes into the property and breaks his leg on the broken step, they can't in any way sue the company or us as the agent. And then E, of course, clearly saying that they will fill out that buyer due diligence checklist form and also the wire fraud alert disclosure. And in F, obviously disclose to the buyer's agent all properties, that's any properties, all properties in which the buyer, as of the date of its EBBA, is either negotiating to acquire or has a present interest in requiring. So if their cousin calls them up and say, hey, we just decided we're going to sell our home, we'd like you to buy it, you don't need your agent anymore. Well, they're here clearly saying that they will disclose that possible seller to their buyer's agent. Any questions on that form or that part of the form? Look at the application then. So basically the buyer confirms there's no other EBBA. Buyer will inform other agents of this EBBA. Very important. So buyer is totally committed to you. And you, of course, are totally committed to the buyer. Any other comments on 4? All right, let's go to 5. Oh, there's a quick application share here. So it's quite good. So on that 4 section, we've got these 3 things that we're talking about. Buyer will share all relevant personal financial information. Buyer will take full responsibility of the condition of the property and will not file any claims against the agent or the company. So that's what number 4 talks about. There we go. Let's go to 5. Oh, a bit more on 4 there. Okay. Buyer will sign the buyer due diligence checklist. That's a 7-page form, which is quite complex and quite detailed. And I'd encourage you, as soon as you've got that, and some of the sellers are actually, they have these ready. As soon as you go into contract, they've got them all ready. So make sure your buyer can go through that checklist and make sure everything's tidied up on all those questions and sign them off. And then, of course, we've got the wire fraud alert disclosure, which is very important because we're going to make sure that we are not, or we are going to be careful not to accept any problems in communications when we're talking about that wire platform. All right, so let's go ahead to 5. I think it's agent relationships. So it's quite a detailed section here. The first part, we're really highlighting a few things here in that 5.1. So buyer designates the buyer's agent, which is you or us, and the principal branch broker for the company as agents for the buyer to locate the properties referenced in section 1 above. Buyer authorizes the buyer's agent or the broker to appoint another agent in the company to also represent the buyer. in the event that they're not going to be available. And of course, all of the fiduciary duties will be held to the same level of competence from that other agent, including loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, rules of care, etc. Then we got this duties of a limited agent. Who can tell me about what that is all about? Who we not heard from today? Let's see. Who'd like to chime in on that? Before I pick someone out, who'd like to tell me about this 5-2? All right, then.
So
Let's
if
see
you're
what
representing both sides,
yes, Kim.
so of course, in that case, you're going to know some of the stuff from both people.
Yeah.
And whether you mean to or not, there's a possibility you could be sharing information that possibly you should not be. So it limits like some of those fiduciary responsibilities.
Yeah, so basically whatever we're sharing with one, we have to share with the other. So we're either going to say nothing or we have to say everything, basically, isn't it? And there's a little note there that says, the example is that we can't disclose, the highest price that a buyer will offer or the lowest price that a seller will accept, and we may have that information. So we either have to say nothing, which means, we're just literally facilitating the paperwork, but we're not part of any negotiation, or we have to reveal everything we know to both parties when we go through those different hoops. So it's really important that we help our client understand what the duties of a limited agent is. Anybody got any questions on that section?
Just a quick comment. At the bottom of 5.1, I always review that last line carefully. A lot of buyers, it is their first transaction. They don't know what, just the type of service, the requirements that are placed on agents. So I make sure that my buyers know, out of that section, that I'm going to be loyal. I've got a duty to be loyal to them, to obey them, obedience, full disclosure, to tell them everything that I'm aware of about the transaction, to be confidential, to exercise care, competency in serving them, and any other duties required by law. That last line, buyers absolutely appreciate reviewing it because they know what my job and what my commitment to them is after reviewing it.
Perfect, absolutely perfect. Great. Let's see if we got a little bit stuck here. I'm not sure why my screen's not moving. Just give me a moment, guys. I have got stuck. Okay, let's see if we can pull out of this. That's completely stuck.
Stephen,
Yes.
I don't know about any of the other agents, but for me personally, in being a limited agent in the times, that I've done it, it's been one of those situations where I almost feel like I'd rather just not. I don't know if that's something that I know, it's almost easier, I think, to represent one side than to do both. It's always been one of those sticky situations I've never wanted to put myself in, but it's a service that we do provide to be limited agent. I just don't know what the things are of other agents that have also represented buyers and sellers. We do have that fiduciary duty and that level of confidence that we have to obtain, but I just find that, and I don't know if it's just my personality, but I just feel like that's always a place that I never want to be, as a limited agent. I try and steer clear from that.
Yeah, I would do exactly the same, Tiffany. I think we're safer because then we can give our full focus to our client. And if you are in a position where maybe if you're representing the seller, for instance, and unrepresented buyer came in, what we've usually done is have them sign an acceptance that they are not represented, you know, so that we are, they know we're only representing the seller. We may do their side of the paperwork, but at least they know that we're not representing them. But yeah, you are better not to get into the limited agent platform because it does compromise what you can share and it compromises your negotiation skills.
Right.
I really
So,
appreciate you guys actually saying that because I 100% agree. I personally wish it weren't a thing and not legal. I feel like a lot of agents get into it, I mean, legitimately because they're greedy and they want both sides of the commission. And if you're in the business for both sides of the commission, in my opinion, you're not in it for the right reasons.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, you really are doing a disservice to your clients when you're representing both sides because you're so limited on the advice you can give. Like the other agent said, a lot of these people are first-time home buyers. They don't know what their options are. They need you to really handhold them and walk them through every step. And when you're constantly worried about what can I tell them, and you have to say, well, I can't give you advice on that because I know information, you're not really being the best agent you can be, and you're not serving your client, in my opinion, the way they need to be served.
Right.
And so they either need to find someone who can serve them 100%, or you need to be that person. That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I just,
If in doubt, don't do it. That's what I say.
you just walk a real fine line doing the limited agency, I think, and it's hard. It's a hard place to be.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, my screen is completely stopped. Oh, here we are. It got going again. There we go. I wonder why that was. Maybe it was an internet glitch. Let's just see if it rolls in again.
Can I just make
Yes.
one more comment? I'm so sorry.
That's good. Fine.
I really liked this analogy when people are explaining it to others that you can't represent the plaintiff and the defendant at a trial at the same time. And so I really like that analogy, and it really makes sense that you can't represent both sides fairly and equally at the same time. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah. And I have seen, I think we did it once, where there was a buyer and a seller, and we knew them both. They'd already agreed on their price. They'd already agreed what they were going to do. One was going to sell the property to the other. They were best friends, and they just needed someone to literally do the paperwork at a fairly low fee because there was not much work involved in it, basically just make sure that everything was lined up. And we did that one for, but there was nothing really to negotiate. They'd already decided what they were going to do, and so it's just a matter of just pushing the paperwork through a brokerage. So maybe that's why that option is there for if you've got a situation where there's no negotiating needed, then maybe it works. But it is rare, I think. Very good. I just put a note there at the bottom of that page. There is a break in the page line and there are signatures at the bottom of the page. So just make sure you understand you've got to get them all signed. Sometimes when you're in a busy mode, you can forget the signatures at the bottom of the page when they're in a split paragraph. There's a few thoughts here on that 5. Obviously, we've got the backup agent support that's highlighted, and of course the agent fiduciary duties that are highlighted as well. And then we just talked about the limited agent duties. There we go. So there are those 3 areas on 5. Okay, looks like this machine's working again, so we can get going. And there's Rami's thoughts: honesty, truth, and integrity. We've got it listed there. Is basically what we should be online with. Agent relationships. So we covered some of these: loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and all duties required by the law. So there we are. A few more here. So let's just go through this, and we'll talk a little bit about application here. When we're working with a client, and particularly working with agent relationships, I'm talking about any agent that we come in contact with when we're working with our client, and obviously the other party. So we're working with those agents. Really important that we make appointments when we're looking at hopefully seeing a home. It's very rare it happens. I've had it happen a couple of times when a buyer has just turned up and walked into my client's home because they have the super box without making an appointment. So let's just make sure that we are squeaky clean on this. If you're representing a buyer, it is absolutely imperative that you work with that listing agent and make sure you make an appointment that's comfortable for that seller for you to go into that, and then be on time. Actually make it whatever window you've agreed on. It's a 30-minute window, it's an actual time. Please be on time, because that seller and the listing agent have orchestrated your appointment to be as per that time. And it's frustrating when people are either late or they turn up before the time. Anybody like to share any stories on that, whether that to deal with the other party agent that's not be considerate on making appointments? Any stories on that? I'll put a note here.
I think everybody
yeah.
has the same thought on this. Sometimes it's easy for sellers to get out of the house. Sometimes it's not. They have little kids that have naps. They work from home. And when you're scheduling a 2-hour window for them to be gone, makes it really difficult. I know sometimes you can text before. That's what I try to do, because if you're scheduling 10 appointments, it's really hard to narrow down your window. But maybe give the common courtesy to say, hey, I'll text you when we're 2 houses out. And then your sellers don't have to be out for the full 3 hours.
Yeah, it's being courteous and kind to the other party, Sherry. And thank you for raising that, because people do have busy lives, and sometimes it takes, quite a bit of orchestration to get everybody on the same page to make that showing happen. Sometimes people have got pets, they've got to, get out of the home and have someone else, help them to do that. So you've got other people that might be involved in preparing the home for a viewing. Our job, yes, fire away.
I think it's also nice to text when you're done, so
Perfect,
that they can come home, and they're not waiting another 30 minutes of your scheduled time. If you scheduled an hour or whatever, to text them when you're done. And then be sure to make all the doors are locked, even if another agent or another showing might be in 20 minutes, to lock everything up again.
Yeah, and while you're on, Lorraine, particularly in this particular market where we've got probably lots of potential buyers on few homes, sometimes you might be coming out of the home and the next agent is there ready with their client. Do you think it's a good idea to close that home up, or to at least put the key back into that Supra so that they can get them registered, the new agent coming in, rather than leaving the home open? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are, it probably would be a good idea to put the super key back in, but if the agent is in the doorway, I don't know if there's a need to relock all the doors. Maybe just let them know that they need to do that, or that it probably needs to be done again. But to really keep yourself safe on a legal end, it probably would be good to lock them all up.
It's a really good idea for the listing agent to know who's entered that property, and the way in which they can do that is by checking on the Supra box. So that's something to think about.
You should never hand over to another agent, because basically they are then not recorded as being in the home. And if there's a problem with anything, whether it's the key getting lost or damage done, it will come back on you. So I know in this market, it's tempting just to hand a key over, but you need to put it back in the box and let the next agent get it out. So the seller's agent has a record of who has been through.
Yeah, that's the best way to protect yourself. What I've done, if I've seen an agent at the door, I said, hey, I'm going to put the key in the Supra here. Let's just pull the door to, and then you can open it up, and then you'll record it on the Supra box. And usually agents are fine with that. But at least gives me protection, because then the listing agent can see when I've been in there and when I've finished my visit with my clients. So just be aware of that. it's being courteous to everybody. And obviously, you know, sometimes when we get very busy and the world gets busy, sometimes we can miss out on keeping squeaky clean on some of these areas. Any other thoughts or comments on that slide? Here's some other thoughts you might consider. Find out about the area in which you are showing a home. So if you look at this large view, you've got the house there. If you look at the large view, you'll see there's what looks like a light blue column right in the middle there. So, you know, figure out what those funny looking things are that are in neighborhoods, because our responsibility is to be able to answer the questions that will come from our client. They may say, well, what is that for? What's that, you know, that item in the neighborhood? Learn a little bit about the selling points of both the home and the neighborhood. Put a note here, don't fake it to make it, be honest and true, and make sure you understand what you're talking about and doing. Definitely print out that full agent and client report. Obviously, you're going to keep the agent report for yourself and have the client report for your client. Go to the MLS to print off that sheet. It has a lot of information on there. And, you know, because you'll know your client, you can often highlight the things that they are very much interested in. So if they're, I don't know, interested in the acreage or the pet section or whatever it may be that they're very much interested in, highlight it on the form, and that can be helpful to them. Lots of good information on these forms, and you know, if you're using this, they've got all the details of the home, and it's easy for them to figure out how they might rate that home if you can highlight those areas. Any thoughts on using that little MLS specification sheet with clients when you're working on going into homes? Okay. If you look at that particular form, you'll notice on there it says possession TBA. Can you see that? Who can tell me what that means? Or what an advantage that might be to a potential buyer.
Where are you looking?
On the specification form there, if you run down the left side, you've got roof, heating, air conditioning, floor, pool, and possession, TBA.
Well, I would use to be determined, not to be.
To be agreed, I think that's what they put there, TBA, to be agreed. But I mean, that could be an advantage for a particular buyer, couldn't it? Because if you've got a buyer that's, I don't know, they're in a situation where they want to buy the house but not ready to move into it, and you know, they'd be happy for the sellers to rent it back for a couple of weeks, and that may be a benefit to them. So know your client so you can see what parts of this form you might highlight, because that can help them make decisions when they running through these homes. Okay, let's move on.
I've emailed that to my clients prior to looking at homes so that they can look it over before we even get to the house. It's been helpful to do that. Yeah,
perfect. And these days, most people have got electronic devices. They can pull up those emails. But if you're working with someone that maybe has not got that, a hard copy might also be good for you to have with you in case they can't pull it up. But that's a great idea. Here's some other thoughts you may consider when you're working with your client, when you're going to a home. Figure out where you're going to meet. There are some agents that may take them in their vehicles. But be careful on that if you are one of those agents. And why might I say that? Anybody got an idea why I might just caution you if you're taking people in your vehicles?
In your vehicle?
Yeah, if you're taking your client in your vehicle to the home, what might you need to be careful of?
Well, make sure you're following all the traffic rules and being safe.
Right.
Very specific insurance. Your quotes have to be up to a very specific standard, I think.
Correct. Yeah. Make sure you got insurance to take clients. Very good. It's a good idea, you know. I've always met my clients at the property, because then I can always be there a little bit earlier, make sure I get into the property, put on the lights, open it up, make sure it's looking good. And then when they come along, I can greet them at the curbside there. But of course, as just mentioned, if you meet them there, you've got no liability in actually taking them there in your vehicle. It's also a good thing for them to travel alone to talk about the property. Sometimes when they're with you in the vehicle, they may not be as open or as keen to, you know, discuss, I guess, downsides or pros and cons of the property with the realtor there. So just consider that. Just covered that one. Make sure you understand the neighborhood when you're, you know, showing a home. Any other thoughts or comments on that slide with regards to agent relationships? Okay, it comes up our second keyword. So we're on time here. About right. Okay. This keyword is going to be early. 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 That should be shouted out. If for some reason you missed the first keyword, you've talked to Leslie Ann. If you've qualified on all the other areas, she'll be able to help you. Please don't share the first word in chat. Talk to Leslie Ann about that if you need.
Can I just say, I cannot see Morris. He's kind of disappeared. I can only see his name. And also Tiffany and Carrie, if you could message me your last name in the chat, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Leslie Ann. At the end of this class, Leslie Ann will share with you a link which will enable you to
switch from my phone or from my computer to my phone. So I'm still here. This is Morris.
Okay, great. Thank you. I saw you earlier, but then you disappeared. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Okay, there's some other thoughts you may be aware of, and just let's make sure we are considerate to the seller. And I think someone already mentioned, it might have been Carrie. Let's be aware of sometimes how long it takes for them to organise these showings. So I put a note here: if you're running late, have a courtesy and politeness to call the listing agent to see if you're still good to show that property. Sometimes we've had listing, we've been the listing agent, and then, you know, they've waited their whole hour for someone to turn up, and nobody turns up. And just after the hour, the buyer's agent will call and say, "Oh, we're running late. We'll be there in 15 minutes." And I'm thinking, you know, we've had the last hour on this, and nobody's turned up, and that can be quite frustrating to a listing agent if they get that call. Did someone have a comment then? Okay. Anybody had difficulties with buyer's agents? If they've been a listing agent, buyer's agents not turning up in those.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was showing my buyers a property in Eagle Mountain, and the owners of the property were just leaving as I arrived, and we were chatting for a minute, and it was almost like they wanted to stay while my buyers were there to tell them all the things that were, you know, that they liked about the property. And part of me was like, then I can't talk freely with my buyers. Do you know what I mean? So I said, "Oh, you are so kind to want to stay and walk us through. That's okay. If we have any questions, I'll give you a call." Was that the right way to handle that?
Yeah, a big great way of handling it. They really should leave the property while you're walking the property with your client. Were they for sale by owners, or did they have an agent? Minette, did they have an agent working with them, or were they for sale by owners?
Yes, they did have an agent.
Oh, okay. So that would be who you would talk to. You'd talk to the agent and say, "Hey, would it be good if you could, you know, move your clients on here so we can, you know, show this home?"
Right.
Work with the agent. It's the agent really should have that discussion with the clients rather than you talking to the clients, because that may be a little bit uncomfortable. So we work with the agent. Of course, if it's a sale by owner, then we just educate the for sale by owner on how this procedure works. You know, what's really interesting, and obviously, you know, I come from England. In England, the system is very, very different. In fact, it's not as good as it is here. But over in England, it's the seller that shows the house to the buyers. Can you believe that? They don't really have a realtor that will walk the home. They go to the home and the seller opens up the house and walks them around the house. And it can be quite uncomfortable when there are, discussions needed about areas of the home that may not be comfortable for the seller to hear. So it's a much better system here. We really should have the seller out of the home.
Hi, Stephen. This is Diane.
Hi, Diane. How are you today?
Good. I just wanted to tell a bad situation that happened where a buyer and buyer's agent came into a home. I was representing the seller, and they spent a little time in the home, and then they sat down and they looked like they were writing up an offer, and they had video cameras. And so the seller knew what they were doing, but as it turned out, they were writing up an offer on another home.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I put a note at the bottom there. Just be aware that many homes do have cameras and microphones these days. And just be aware that they could be watching and they could be listening. And, certainly if conversation is uncomfortable about the property, that may not be a good thing. So, that's awful. They're writing up an offer for another home. I can't believe that. Thanks for sharing that one.
And it's advisable to have a discussion with your buyers if you're going to see 2 to 3 homes in a row, to make sure that they actually use the restrooms before they get to the home, not inside any of the homes that they're going to be seeing. That's a really troubling and if not offensive thing to the sellers to have someone use their facilities as they are there. So I always just have a very light conversation that, especially if there are 2 or 3 homes in a row that will be swinging by, to just stop by Denny's or stop by, Burger King, whatever, on the way before we get there, to make sure that we honor the seller's home.
Yeah, and particularly with families where you've got youngsters in there, the kiddies will need some help to be able to take care of that need before they get into the home. If you're representing the seller, it's always a good idea to have a little notice that might say, by the bathroom door, we thank you for not using the restroom, just so that we are keeping it clean and tidy, and particularly in this, health conscious season we're in. So let's make sure that we are very respectful of people's personal area. Thanks for raising that, Remy. Here's some other thoughts you might consider. I'll just load these in so I don't lose my internet connection. I'll just load these in. Here's some things here that you may make sure you've got with you. Of course, if you're able to review the property online, that's a really good idea, particularly those who have got these, 3-dimensional walkthroughs online. Make a note of all the special features so that when they're walking the home, they can easily see the highlighted areas, because sometimes they may miss them if they're not highlighted early on. Obviously, greeting your client at the curbside is really good. It saves you any responsibility or liability on getting them there. Work with that specification sheet and highlight the areas on there that might be comfortable. Remind the buyer, your client, how much time they have at the property. Sometimes if you're working with a buyer, maybe they're disabled, maybe they're elderly, maybe they have a large family, so they've got a few troops to rally up. Just make sure that you've got enough time from property to property. Know your client well so that you can carefully orchestrate that time scale, because if you're definitely seeing multiple houses, you can easily get behind time, and that can be a challenge for the listing agent and the sellers of the properties at the end of your line. So be careful on that. Of course, have your business cards. And if you can leave one of your business cards at the property, that's very helpful to the listing agent and to the seller. They know who's been into their property, And if they have any concerns, they can call you direct. Any comments or questions on that slide? Okay, let's go to 6. So personal advice. This is quite a detailed section here. You'll notice it starts off with the company and the buyer's agent are trained in the marketing of real estate. I always find that amusing personally, because when I got trained to be a realtor, there was no marketing of real estate. It was all to do with the laws and rules and regulations of Utah and federal law for real estate. But of course, in this section, we make it clear that that's the area we're trained in. And we are not professionals in any other area regarding the physical condition of the property or any tax or legal matters. The buyer is advised not to rely on the company for, or the agents for any of these determinations of the condition of the property, which includes, the zoning, the building code requirements, the appliances, the heating, plumbing, cooling, electrical fixtures, sewer problems, moistures, roof, foundation, utilities, property lines, exact footage or acreage of the property, etc. So we make it clear in this section that we're going to market the home. That's what we're good at. And we're strongly recommending the buyer to engage in their own professional services that they can contract out for inspections and investigations, test surveys, etc. So anybody got any thoughts or comments on section 6 there? Anybody have any challenges with this area? Okay, so obviously application here, we need to make sure that our client knows that professional advice is very, very limited from the agent or the company. We can give professional advice on marketing the property, and we strongly encourage them to seek professional advice from other contractors on this real estate transaction with regards to the condition of the home and any legal or tax matters. Okay, let's go to this little section here. Be careful on this. Sometimes we can get emotionally involved in these homes, but we shouldn't be rating them. If anybody's going to rate the home, it's going to be the client. They're the ones that will buy it. So when you tour the home, I encourage you to not tour too many. I remember when I first got involved in this business, I think I had 14 homes in one day. I thought it was a real good idea. And by the end of the day, I didn't know which home was which. But it was a full day. I did keep on track, but there's too many homes to do. So I would suggest, do 4 to 6 homes. That's probably workable, and you can keep within your time zones. I covered that one. You may ask them to write on the back of your MLS report their likes and dislikes, which can be helpful if they are seeing a number of homes during the day, and they can figure out, which they would like to run with and which they wouldn't. And I've also made a note at the bottom, try and make this a fun and an upbeat and positive experience. Let's talk about that last one, be neutral in your conversation. If your client says, what do you think about this? How do you respond to that? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Anybody had their clients ask them what they think about that? What do you think about the home? Do you think it's a good home to buy?
I always tell them it doesn't matter what I think. I'm not the one living here.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Great answer. Yeah. Yeah, be neutral in your conversation. If they say, oh, goodness, I really don't like the way this layout is, you do not want to say, yeah, I agree with you, it's an awful layout, because you may have a microphone in that home just recording you. But whether you've got a microphone there or not, please try and be neutral in your conversations. They're the ones who are buying the home. We are there showing the home. Any other thoughts or comments on that slide, or anybody got any stories they'd like to share with regards to neutral conversations? Okay, obviously we want to know how they feel about the home. I always use the 1 to 10 rating option. That is usually the easiest for me to work with. And I'll say, how do you rate this home between 1 and 10? And I've already had the conversation beforehand. If they come up with a 7+, then it's probably going to be workable, but a 6 or below will not be workable. So it's an easy way to sort of reduce these homes very quickly. And, if they've got those rates on each of the homes they've seen, then we can easily get rid of the ones that are not going to make the grade. Some of you may also work the king option, which is, the first home you see is the king. And the next one, was it better than the king? Was it better than the first one? If it was, that becomes the king. And some realtors will use that method to hone down which homes, are workable. Anybody got any comments or thoughts or other ways in which they might have their clients rate the homes?
One thing I always do is we always come up with a nickname for each home so that it helps us to remember, this is the green carpet home, this is the black dog home.
Yeah.
Some way to remember it other than just a plain old home. So it makes that feature stand out, and then it makes that house stand out. So it's easier to remember each home by their nickname.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, super. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's go to 7. It's only a short little section here. I kind of like this visual. So, dispute resolution, parties agree that any dispute related to this exclusive buy-broker agreement arising prior to or after the acquisition of the property shall first be submitted to mediation through a mediator provider mutually agreed upon by the buyer and the company. Each party agrees to bear its own costs for mediation. Mediation fails, the other remedies available under this exclusive buy-broker agreement shall apply. Anybody had to go into mediation with a dispute? Anybody got any comments on that?
My broker's always told me to put shall there. I know that it varies. Some people put may, some people put shall.
So I think you may be referring to the REPC.
Oh, yes. Okay,
So
sorry.
you're absolutely right. Yeah, so the REPC does have that option.
Okay.
And
What do you recommend there, actually? I'm just curious.
So this is a statement. If we're going to change this, we would have to add an addendum. But on this part, it's basically saying the parties agree that any dispute related to this EBBA, before or after, it's going to be submitted to mediation. So we're going to go to mediation right from the start on this agreement. Okay, it is different on the REPC, as Tiffany just highlighted. You have the option shall or may, and different brokerages run different styles on that. And I've been with 3 different brokerages, and 2 have been one way and 1 have been the other way. So work out with your broker if you are representing. Obviously representing the client. If you're in a position where you're going to make a decision, make sure your broker understands, or you understand what your broker feels more comfortable about. There are advantages either way.
Okay.
But yeah, on this particular one, it's going to go to mediation. And if there are any costs, then basically each party will bear those costs. And I do quite like that visual, because this is not an argument. Okay, you can see there's one on the chatter on the left and the other one's listening, and that's how we should mediate. We should not get frustrated with each other. So mediation first, each party bears its own cost. That's what we learn in 7 on this buy-broker agreement. Any other thoughts or comments on that slide? Okay, let's go to 8. Has anybody had to deal with 8 at all? Do we have any brokers here maybe that have seen it go to clause 8? No? Okay. So the sector is providing 7, in case of the employment of an attorney in any matter arising out of this exclusive buy-broker agreement, the prevailing party shall be it shall be entitled to receive from the other party all costs and attorney fees, whether the matter is resolved through court action or otherwise. If through no fault of the company, any litigation arising out of the buyer's employment of the company under this exclusive buy-broker agreement, whether before or after the acquisition of the property, The buyer agrees to indemnify the company and buyer's agent from all costs and attorney fees incurred by the company and or the buyer's agent in pursuing and or defending such action. This exclusive buyer agreement shall be governed and construed in accordance with the laws of the state of Utah. So we're clearly saying there, if we go to this this section of the agreement, then we're not be paying them money out. Basically, as are our company, it is going to be taken care of by the party. So anybody got any questions or thoughts on that section 8? We're basically saying here, prevailing party agrees to compensate or reimburse all costs, attorney fees. And I understand, not that I've been involved in any of these, but I understand these costs can be quite high. So hopefully you can be comfortable beforehand with mediation. Yes.
Stephen, question on, I thought that the party who lost in court was responsible for paying the attorney's fees and all court costs. Is that not correct?
Ah, you are right. Yes, you're right. I don't know why I put that back. I got that one from. Let me just have to change that one. This is a new set of slides. This one is. Yeah. Thank you for that, Minette. That's a spell area. Thank you. I'll to that one. But yes, it's the party that loses compensates the party that wins. You're absolutely right. Thank you for that. Okay, let's pull up. So you might want to jot down that hotline number, 800-594-8933. If you ever get to a stage where you are, moving into this area of concern, and give that number a call first, and those people will be able to help you as to how you navigate through this. Okay, let's go for buyer authorizations. I've had a bit of a dicky eye this week. I can't see that well. That's why I'm struggling a bit. It's my left eye. I've got something in there, I think. Let's look at number 9 here. So buyer authorizations. So here we've got the buyer authorizes the company and or buyer's agent to disclose after closing to each MLS in which the party, the company participates, consistent obviously with the MLS, the final terms and sales at the price of the property acquired by the buyer under the terms of this agreement, and B, to communicate with the buyer for the purpose of soliciting real estate related goods and services during the term. The buyer fully agrees that in any transaction for the acquisition of property, the earnest money will be deposited and placed into an interest-bearing trust account with interest paid to the Utah Association of Realtors. So basically just making sure they understand that after everything's been disclosed there, that earnest money most likely will go into an interest-bearing account. So we've got basically any information on the MLS will be disclosed and shared, of course. And then, of course, we've got full communications with the buyer, and that interest-bearing trust account, earnest money will most likely end up in there. Anybody got any questions on 9?
I've just got a quick comment.
Yes,
Stephen,
thanks,
so it's interesting. A couple of times I found that the buyers have appreciated being educated that the information once they purchase that home will be disclosed to the MLS to allow others to use their home in their comparative market analyses down the road. We are a part of an industry. This information allows everybody to work in real estate and to understand what the values are in real estate, buyers appreciate that. I mean, so it's been intriguing. A couple of times, they felt really good about knowing that, this information will, of course, assist the industry and the real estate market in doing its work. So it's great to let them know that, and I think most of them appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it is good to explain it. Sometimes you may have a buyer that's not very, if they don't understand this, they may not be very happy that people know what they've paid for a house. But of course, that's why we use it there to enable us to get this industry better presented, so that we all have that information, so we know how we can do our CMAs, we know how we can come up with an estimated or opinion of price on properties. So yeah, it is important to let the client understand that information is going to be shared, and it's for the better of the industry, as Remy just mentioned. Thanks for that. Let's talk about attachments. I've got a few bits and pieces that might come in with this. Of course, we've got that buyer due diligence checklist. That's going to be part of this agreement. We've got the wire fraud, and then we've got any addendums. And if we are adding addendums, just make sure we've got the numbers incorrectly there. And sometimes we may attach a PDF of some detail as well, a document. So number 10 clearly says the buyer due diligence checklist and wire fraud alert disclosure are incorporated into this EBBA. And then we're going to say whether there are or are not any additional items attached to this agreement. Anybody got any comments on that? Okay, so we're going to be checking R if we're adding on top of the buyer due diligence checklist and the wire fraud alert disclosure. Anything else, we would then put R. If not, we would then check R not. Of course, anything that is attached to this agreement is part of the agreement. That's really what we're saying in that section. Okay, we'll go back right at the very beginning. Remy talked to us about the equal housing opportunity. We'll spend a bit of time on this. It's quite important we understand this clearly. So it's only a small little line here. Buyer and the company will comply with federal, state, and local fair housing laws. So let's have a look at that and see if we understand it in fully. So there we have that little logo. Let's see if we can learn a bit on this, because sometimes this can be quite complex. So there are 7 fair housing laws. Anybody like to talk to me about what they are? Who can figure out what all 7 are? Okay, I'll load them in for you. We know these: race, color, religion. Of course, you got the sex, and you got disability, marital status, and the last one is national origin. So there you 7. Okay, this is part of federal law within the USA. And if you go to Utah State Legislature, you'll go to this little web address. That's the https://le.utah.gov. There's a whole load of other information there just for this state. If you can't go to sleep one night, go there. You'll definitely fall asleep pretty quickly. There's a lot of detail. So it's a good idea to look at it, and it's a good idea to be familiar where you need to go if you need to have more information. But this equal housing opportunity is quite important, and I think it's going to start ramping up as we continue to progress through real estate in the modern world. I'm going to share with you something in a moment which might be helpful on this window to the law, and it will talk about love letters. Anybody familiar with what they term as love letters in this industry for a buyer trying to acquire a property? Okay.
Yeah, so they send a letter along with their offer saying, our family loves this home, all this kind of stuff. But it can break those laws because then they could make their decision based on that.
Yeah, that's right. They're very careful. I'd encourage you not to
Can I
use it.
add one thing to that? One
Yeah.
thing it's been helpful to educate my buyers. I feel like love letters work both ways. So the buyer thinks, oh, I'm a single dad. Maybe I'm an immigrant. I'm a minority. In this religious affiliation. So I want to write this letter to help me maybe win the hearts of the seller. What they don't understand is sometimes it backfires and may do the opposite without even knowing. So I think to educate your buyers on, that you understand what they're trying to do and you understand why love letters seem appealing, but here are some of the problems with them, as well as sellers, because when sellers read that, you get all this information about those protected things without really asking for it from the buyers, and that may or may not sway their decision and put them in a really compromising position.
Yeah. So if you've got a client who's saying, oh, I want you to attach this letter or this email with the offer, how would you handle that request? And your client is really, really up for this. They got their photographs, they've got all their information, maybe their cousin or their brother or their grandpa lived in the same neighborhood or on the road or wherever, and they've got it all in there. How are you going to handle that to keep your client comfortable? Was that you, Tiffany? Did you just unmute? I was trying to see who spoke.
I'm still on.
You're still on, yeah. How would you handle that, Tiffany, if you got your own clients? I really want you to add this, you'll include this with the offer.
Well, like I said, it's like others have said, it can both backfire and it could help and it could backfire. So I just think the love letter situation, I would tell them, I understand what you're trying to do. These people, I'm sure would love to see this, maybe, after the fact, if you get the house, but we have to maintain those equal rights for our buyers and sellers.
Okay.
Those equal housing opportunities. I mean, you can't sway a buyer or a seller either way.
Perfect. I'm just going to load those in again, those 7. This is how you would handle it. You would basically go to this federal fair housing law and you would say, what we need to do as a potential buyer, we need to make sure that we're complying with the 7 fair housing laws. And we're looking at race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, national origin. Once they start to see that and they look at their letter or whatever it is, you take out all the things that would, going contrary to those 7 platforms, there really is no letter left. Because all you end up with is the bones of the offer, which is, the money they're offering to buy it for, and your deadline dates, the flexibility of how you can get into the home. Once you take all of those out of the love letter, there's no reason to have a love letter, because all love letters have some of that in there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the way to handle it, is to try and just go back to the law, and our job as the realtor is to help them understand what the law is. And what we're trying to do here is make sure that we are in no way compromising ourselves as the buyer, but also we're not compromising the seller, because the seller could be compromised if they see any part of that letter that has any of those ingredients. Does that make sense? Anybody else like to comment on that?
So in fact, just a few months ago, several of you, if not all of you, may remember that the NAR the National Association of Realtors came out clearly with a statement saying that love letters are not okay, discouraging love letters. So our National Association of Realtors, of which we are members, has for ethical reasons or whatever reasons said these are in violation of our association. So yeah, they're just not okay, period. If you are a realtor, as we are asked not to do them.
Correct. Yeah. And that was the start of last year, I believe, but I think they ramped it up a bit in January of this year. So it's good to have this conversation with your client because, the client knows the address of the house they're looking at buying. Sometimes a buyer, unbeknown to you, may send a note, a card, a letter, some sort of mail to the seller and say, hey, we're looking at buying your property. I thought we'd just let you know that our grandpa used to live in this neighborhood. He knows a lot of the people here, and we're really hoping that you'll choose us to die. I've actually had that happen. We had that happen with one of our clients. So some of our buyers may need some very careful maneuvering when it comes to these, as they call, love letters. I'm going to show you a video if I can load it in. You give me a moment. I'll see if I can figure this, and I'll show you. Window to the law. It's only about 3 or 4 minutes, so just give me a moment, and I shall try and share this. Share it. Here we go. Let's see. Should get this one. Bear with me. Eyes aren't too good today, so you will see that. Give me the thumbs up if you can see that.
Hi, I'm Charlie Lee, Senior Counsel and Director of Legal Affairs at NAR. As buyers compete in a hot real estate market, they are searching for ways to stand out from the crowd. One method being used is to send a love letter to entice the seller into choosing their offer. While a love letter may seem innocent, they can raise fair housing concerns and risk exposing both the real estate broker and their clients to legal risks. The Fair Housing Act makes discrimination illegal in the sale or rental of housing and prohibits making housing otherwise unavailable because of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status. Many states and local governments have their own fair housing laws, which can include additional protected categories. The use of a love letter often presents fair housing issues because they often contain personal information about the buyer, such as their race and culture or traditions, as a way of appealing to the seller's emotions. Some buyers even go as far as sending sophisticated packages that include photographs and videos. For example, a buyer might send a letter with a photo of their family around a Christmas tree. As a result, the buyer has revealed their religion, which is a prohibited basis for a seller to base their decision to reject an offer. While it may not be the buyer's intent for the seller to use this information to discriminate, that is essentially the position that a love letter can place the seller. When considering that the information cannot be easily forgotten or unseen, a love letter may ironically cause the seller to be fearful of selecting the buyer's offer because of potential discrimination issues. Therefore, real estate professionals should advise their clients about the risk of love letters and, at a minimum, stress the importance of avoiding including any information in the letter that could be used to legally discriminate. But of course, even a photograph of the buyers could lead a seller to give preference to a buyer or reject them based on race or other background. Fair housing is a high priority throughout the country, and states are closely monitoring the practice of love letters. In fact, just recently, Oregon enacted a law to take effect on January 1, 2022 that bans the use of buyer love letters. Here are some best practices to consider when it comes to love letters. At the outset of the relationship, speak to your client about the risks of buyer love letters and the potential fair housing issues they raise. Remind your seller client that an offer should be assessed based only on objective criteria, such as price and timing. If your seller client insists they want to receive buyer love letters, advise them to consult legal counsel and to document their decision-making process in selecting an offer. Avoid helping buyer clients to draft or deliver love letters. Be sure to warn them against revealing any personal information that could raise fair housing issues. Counsel them to focus on the characteristics of the home or other objective information. Lastly, help your buyer clients find other ways to differentiate themselves to win the property. Beyond offering more money, the buyer may consider offering more flexibility with the closing date, additional earnest money, or waiving other contingencies that may appeal to the seller. Thank you for watching this episode of Window to the Law.
Okay, just give me a moment. Let's see where anybody seen that one before, by the way? Is that the first time you've seen it?
First time.
Okay. Okay, what did you think of that?
Good.
I would suggest you make a note of this URL. You can always share that with your client if you needed to. Just trying to find the screen here. I think I've found it. Have I found it yet? There we go. Oh, there we are. I think I found it now. Okay. Let me pull that in. Okay, there it is. So that's the URL at the bottom there. If you had a challenge, it would be good to share that with your client, and I think it makes it fairly clear. And, you know, another way in which you can tackle it is you can say, you know, if you're looking at doing this, I would encourage you to seek legal counsel before we do it. That also puts them off as well. They did talk about some characteristics that we can share and that make this deal happen. I mean, basically, it came under two things. It was price and timing with regards to negotiation. So let's just make sure we don't get involved in this. If we are representing the seller, I know we're talking about buyers today, but if we are representing the seller and you have several offers in, the seller may ask you some questions that could also compromise this law. What might be some of those questions the seller could ask you? We have to be careful of when we answer. Anybody had a seller that's asked them questions about this buyer and this buyer? Because obviously we're working with the agent and sometimes we'll know some things about those buyers.
I just closed on a listing a few weeks ago that had, you know, in fact, the seller's, he's a dear friend, and his favorite question was, are the buyers that are expressing interest, his favorite question, are they LDS?
Yeah, how did you respond to that? You know what I mean? How do you respond to that? That's his favorite question.
Oh my goodness! You know, are the LDS? You know, of course, he and his wife are members of the church. If you know, they are active. You know, and in their minds, their neighborhood, just right here, I mean, is just you know, better off by having, you know, members of the church there. And oh yeah, so obviously, my answer, you know, over and over again was Dale. Dale was his first name, Dale. If you don't want to end up in a lawsuit, if you don't want to end up completely in an awful situation legally, with the law, with both federal and state law, we will never, ask a buyer what their faith is. We don't want to know. We don't want to know. So, yeah.
That's how I always handle it. I always say, I don't know, and I can't ask. So, and I just say for legal reasons, we don't ask, just so there's no discrimination. That's how I handle it every time. And that usually will shut them down pretty quick.
Yeah.
The challenge is when you do know, you then got to say, we can't share that information. I've had people ask me, have they got any children? Because I need some children to play with my kids in the neighborhood. Another question maybe, is this a single parent? We've got to be very careful that we don't get involved in discussing any part of this topic. All we say is, look, let's look at the offer. We're looking at a few things here. We're looking at the price, of course. We're looking at the deadline dates. All right. And then we're looking at what other areas of flexibility or negotiation is in our favor with regards to purchasing this home. And that's another good reason why the sellers are not in the home when we're trying to show that home. I can't remember who it was who spoke earlier about that today, but ideally the sellers need to be away from the home when we as the buyer are showing that home, so they can't see who's going in there. And we've had situations before where we've seen the seller goes over the road to a neighbor, or he's just in the park round the corner, and they kind of spying to see who goes and looks at their home. And if they don't like the look of them, then they're already discriminating against that potential buyer. So this is a very, very important area, and I think it is going to hot up even more as we move into a modern world. We've just got to be very, very careful that we are not compromised ourselves as realtors. Anybody got any other thoughts or comments, or even stories they'd like to share? Because I know when we share stories, people can remember the stories and they can be hopefully squeaky clean on this topic.
Jim? Yeah, I had some sellers that did what you said. They would kind of go around the block and wait in their, it's where they could see people come. They'd wait in their car. And they had an upstairs master bedroom. And so this is a little different. I mean, it's kind of categorizing though, but these people did make an offer and they'd seen them go in, and they had several offers, but it was a senior couple in which she was very heavy set, the woman. And so anyway, they thought, and they had already had a buyer back out based on something, to do with the master upstairs. So they were a little, on edge about that anyway. But so immediately when they talked to me about these offers, they said, we saw her and, we're worried about that. We're worried that then they're going to back out because of that eventually. So thoughts on that? They didn't want to take the offer. So, and again, it's because
not a protected class, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't. That's why it's an interesting situation. It's not a protected class, but yet they hit, it's interesting though, because they immediately marked them.
Yeah, it's still a form of discrimination, even though it's not necessarily listed easily in one of those sevens. But I suppose if you drill down under one of those, you could probably end up with that topic. But ultimately, they didn't like the look of that potential
buyer. They had
buyer.
a concern, that those people would also back out from the home. So it is, I don't know if it just isn't a good idea, like you're stating, for them to watch and see who even goes into the home.
Yeah. If we're representing the seller, let's make sure we encourage them to be just completely away and not get involved with it. That's why they're hiring us as the realtor, is we're going to make sure we look after them, and we're going to help them, acquire the best offer. And the best offer is price, dates, timing and flexibility. That's going to be the best offer. It doesn't really matter who the people are.
So then does the same apply to having the cameras in the house?
Yeah, and I think that's going to become more and more of a challenge. You're absolutely right, Lorraine. We've got a situation now, even on the doors, you know, you get these very smart little
doors.
cameras. Yeah, the ring, they can see exactly who's there. And, you know, they can see what they're saying, how they're commenting. They can see the folk move in. And we've just got to educate our client, particularly if we're representing the seller with a listing agent, help them understand that's not part of this process. You know, we've got to treat people fairly.
Can I add one thing?
Area. Yes, please.
One thing I have noticed in taking listings is we also need to be really careful in taking the listing when we write up or have our sellers help us write up the comment section. Again, sometimes what you write in the comment section is not state law approved, if that makes sense. So educate your people and make sure what you're writing in the comment section is very provable facts, like master on second level, extra bedroom downstairs. Like, you can't say anything about kids walking to school on this quiet tree-lined street filled with Christians. Like, that can't be in the comment section because everyone's reading that, and that gets your sellers into a compromising situation as well.
Yeah, we've got to completely be out of the emotional connections on this. It's just got to be a nuts and bolts. These are the figures, these are the dates, and this is where the flexibility is. Very good. Anybody like to share anything else on that screen before we move on? I think it's an important one we covered.
Yeah, sure. Yes, so to Sherry's, yes. So to Sherry's point, you know, I mean, not just the sellers get into trouble. You as an agent will get into trouble because you're responsible for the comments that go on the MLS, period. Absolutely. I mean, you have that responsibility, you know, you're the one who puts them there. And so if you're putting language, you know, either from seller or from whatever source that discriminates, you are in trouble.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's absolutely right. I totally agree. I say that because I had some clients say, oh, we already know, we wrote up something we really want to have listed in the comment section. And I read through it and it was that kind of thing. Look out your kitchen window as the kids walk to school in our Christian neighborhood. And I said, we can't have this. So I think educating your sellers on the reasoning for sort of the dry comments that you put in is helpful, so they recognize, you know, why you're discrediting their lengthy, wordy, well-prepared statement that they've offered to you.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks for your comments on that, everybody. That was good. We'll just get into the last leg of this class here. So this little section 12, very simple, and it's great that we have this opportunity because we can get a lot more work done without having to move original copies. But basically what we're saying here is the benefit of modern technology. We're going to use electronic transmissions, which include email and fax. I'm not sure how many people use faxes these days, but that's what's on there. Of a signed copy of the exclusive buy broker agreement and any addenda, and retransmission of any signed contract transmission will be the same as the delivery of original. So that's what we're basically saying here, and everybody's going to be happy with that. These days we've got some very, very clever systems where we can, you know, share documents and have them electronically signed. I'll just make one little note on this section is when you're working with your client, just make sure you know where your clients are, because sometimes, you know, if they're traveling or if they're on business or if they're, you know, one's working nights, someone's working days, you've got to make sure you give yourself enough time to get these documents signed, even though in our minds, we may think they can be signed very quickly. Often we'll need to make sure we know where our clients are so we can get those documents signed in a timely manner. So make sure you've got those dates or times lined up correctly and get them signed off. Any thoughts on that screen? Okay, so I'll go to 13. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is due on sale. I'd be interested to know if anybody's had to action this section. Due on sale. So it does happen, and it's more often in certain areas than other areas. So basically, certain types of transactions may trigger what is commonly referred to as a due on sale clause. Due on sale clause typically states that the seller or lender of mortgage may call the loan due and payable in full if the seller participates in certain types of transactions. These types of transactions may include, but not limited to, transactions where A, the sale of the property does not result in the underlying debt being paid in full. B, parties enter into a seller finance transaction. I think that's more, that's probably the one that's going to happen more than the others. And of course, you've got your lease agreement. And then you've got the D, which is any unauthorized transfer of title of the property has occurred without the lender's consent. And of course, that will trigger it as well. If that happens, then the lender may call the entire unpaid balance of the loan immediately due. Has anybody had this happen at all with a client, or know of someone that's had this due on sale clause applied? We've got any agents here that have seen this one take place? No. Anybody got any comments or thoughts or questions on that line? Okay. I said earlier, I think B is probably the most common on this one. So if you are working with a seller finance transaction, be aware sometimes those circumstances can change for the seller, and it may trigger a due on sale clause. So basically that's quite simple. Lender could call the entire unpaid loan immediately. There we have it. Okay. All right. Any questions on that slide? That's on 13. Okay. Entire agreement. This basically clearly says that everything, including the checklist and the fraud disclosure, all addendums, everything that's going on here, it's all going to be part of this exclusive buyer broker agreement. And it can only be changed or modified when we've got signed agreements from all parties. Okay, so that's the entire agreement, includes all the documents, whatever they may be. And we add to that as we go along. And it can only be modified if we've got all parties that are authorized, that is, to sign the different agreements. Very good. Anybody got any questions on 14? Okay, effective date, which is on 15. We referred to this earlier on, if you remember. This is the date we're going to refer to if we do add any addendums. It's always going to be the effective date that we refer to, which is the start date. And obviously we're going to have this signed by the buyers. And of course, either ourselves or the broker would authorize that at the bottom there. Any questions on that one? Okay, so the effective date is the date entered into the agreement. This date will be referenced on all attachments and documents added to this agreement. Authorized broker receive a copy of all signed documents. That's really important. We're not legally binding until our broker has received these documents. So make sure whatever system you're using, that your broker is in the loop. I know at Presidio we use SkySlope, which is quite a complex but very, very good system. And as soon as we enter those documents, the brokers can see them instantly. But if you're a smaller brokerage, you're not using an electronic system, just make sure your broker is getting a copy of these documents as they happen, because that's what makes them legal. Any questions on 15? And make sure that all your documents are in order, as you will not get paid. That's just the way it works in this game. There's our third keyword coming up, and the other two have been shared. forgot this was coming up. Effective will be the third keyword on this class. If for some reason you've missed any of the other two, talk to Leslie out privately. We cannot share those in chat. Effective, EFFECTIVE, is the third keyword. I can tell you the other two keywords did actually begin with the letter E today. Very bottom of the form, we've got this copyright. How important is copyright? Anybody tell me how important copyright is? Clearly says at the bottom, this form is copyrighted by the Utah Association of Realtors for use solely by its members, of which we are members. Any unauthorized use or modification, copying or distribution without written consent is prohibited. No representation is made as to legal validity or adequacy of any provision on this form in any specific transaction. If you desire specific legal or tax advice, consult an appropriate professional. And this one was reviewed in November 19. So that is your form. Obviously, we don't modify it. And if you've got any questions, you'll talk to a professional, whether it's tax or legal. And you've got your initials at the very bottom of that page. Don't forget those. It's a 3-page document, so you've got initials on every page. And even though you've signed on this page above it, you still need to put the initials at the bottom because those initials are also qualifying you agree with this copyright section. Anybody got any questions on that part of the form? Okay. Note at the bottom there, cannot modify, copy, or distribute this form without authorization. All rights reserved, and you'll notice the bottom there on the Utah real estate, you'll see save the packet. Make sure you save it to somewhere where you can remember it. Often people will put in the client's name, but you'll need to put the full name in, because if you put Smith in, you could end up with lots of Smiths. So make sure you can put it in there, maybe put the address in so that you can easily locate those forms. Anybody got any questions on that slide? Okay, that very, very bottom section there says clearly that all data, including all measurements and calculations of areas obtained from various sources, has not been and will not be verified by the broker or MLS. All information should be independently reviewed and verified for accuracy. So basically saying, you know, the information we've got is the best we've got, but we can't guarantee it's correct. You'll need to figure that out yourself, or the buyer and seller have a responsibility to figure that out. But we've done the best we have, and we probably are not going to correct it. Anybody got any questions or comments on that very last section of the page? Very good. Summary today, we've gone through that exclusive buyer broker agreement. Sorry for the glitches earlier on, I was struggling to see, but we did get through it. And I'm grateful for those of you who had the opportunity to share your experiences and also share your thoughts and comments and questions. And also wanted to tidy up on this slide presentation, which I appreciate. Let's make sure that we can do our very best in helping our clients be educated and understand the benefits of being completely neutral, both in buying and selling, but particularly in this class as a buyer's agent. Anybody got any final comments or thoughts before we close up this class today? Very good. Leslie, I should come on in a moment and share that form with you. And I would ask you to do that today if you can. I will bank these hours today. If you don't fill your form out today, it could be a couple of weeks before I bank your hours, because I usually bank them on the day. And I will ask you to please check and make sure that your hours have been banked within the next 5 days. If for some reason they haven't, it will be because the information you've entered on the form has been mismatched as it's gone through Pearson View to the division. There's nothing I can do about that. So I can only give you I can only give them the information you give me. So within 5 days, check and make sure your hours have been banked. If not, contact either me or Leslie Ann, and we shall make sure we work with you and figure out what was incorrect in that information. So Leslie Ann, are you with us, Leslie Ann? Are you able to give us that link so that everybody can fill that form in?